Hi guys, so a quick update as to what I have been doing for the last mostly 3 weeks with respect to the program that I'm in, but also the work that I'm doing in terms of web development and understanding the rapid changes that everyone is experiencing right now in the web development world and in the knowledge working world, where we are experiencing the rapid development, rapid change of the AI models, the artificial intelligence industry, as it applies to the type of task work that knowledge workers tend to do, which is writing papers, writing articles, creating designs, web development designs, media designs, social media marketing, analysis, reports for consulting reports, all kinds of work all across the board, all across from the different sectors, from pharmaceuticals to engineering to any type of research, stacks, analysis, wherever you are putting together reports of any kind, and the amount of paperwork that exists, in the workplace in just a massive country like the United States of America, but also a smaller country like Canada, is immense. There's literally tons and tons of paperwork going on every day. And a lot of that is now being done with AI models. People are doing a lot of that work with AI. They're using AI every day. Facebook recently mentioned something like 1 billion users are actively using their AI, their Llama AI, their free Llama Maverick, which I'm using. They also have a more expensive Llama that they haven't released yet. I do use the free Llama Maverick pretty much every day now, as well as a number of other different models that I'm using, pretty much consistently for various tasks. Most of them are search, provide some examples of text. For example, take these documents, provide some tags for it, or this information and provide some tags, or come up with a title, summarize this paragraph, maybe come up with a topic sentence, a body sentence, a transition sentence for this paragraph, or generate a number of different ideas. I do find that with almost every model I'm working with, I have to rewrite the text myself afterward to give it what I find a unique flavor. So while people are saying AI models are going to replace all of this work, I just wanted to point out, before I get back to describing what it is that I've been doing with the models in particular, that the results of the models are somewhat generic in my experience, unless the prompt is really lengthy and descriptive almost of each sentence, and descriptive in terms of how these sentences themselves are constructed. For example, you could say increase the frequency of pronouns, or you could say something very specific like, there's a language use that is required for how you're going to describe any particular given sentence or any particular given paragraph. So as we learn to communicate in a way that models can understand in terms of how they structure their sentences, we can have more control over the frequency of word use and the way that the model arranges the words, which is, I think, is the next direction of clever integration with the models. But I'm finding right now, if I ask a model to do some rewriting of some work, something that I've written, it tends to return kind of a menu type of a paper. So it has heading and then subject matter. There's not necessarily a structure to the paragraph in terms of what you would think of academic writing, opening sentence, body sentence, transition sentence. There's not a lot of eloquence. There's not a lot of, even when you choose the academic tone, there can be, if you select an academic tone in your prompt, in your directive, then there can be some academic language use in terms of using words that have descriptors on either side of them and using more advanced vocabulary. But I still find ultimately that there is something missing. And so there's a lot of room for the human side of the art of writing still, in terms of communicating well and creating a good report, or a quality report, something that stands out in all those areas that written material stands out, which are almost subliminal. When you read a particular type of text, in the same way that when you hear a particular type of speaker who is a gifted speaker, then you can hear those subtle harmonies, which people like me who study how other people speak are always looking for those subtle harmonies. I would love it if I could speak in the way that some speakers are incredibly gifted and they speak incredibly well. And when I listen to them, I would like to keep listening to them because I think they do such a wonderful job of communicating in a harmonious way. And the language that we write very much can follow along in this same pattern in that there is exceptional writing. And it's something that we don't necessarily see, but we can feel it, we can hear it, we can understand it. I haven't found AI to be coming up with anything like that. It creates a passable document, but it is not a document that has any type of advanced language usage. It has advanced language usage, but it's not clever. It's not human. It's not human. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think when we're talking about job replacement and we're talking about a lot of the tasks that we're using AI to do, these are tasks that are repetitive tasks. So it's the same type of work that programming replaced in the first place. It's just going to be able to replace that work much more quickly. I'm sure as I continue on these courses and learn more about AI, I'm going to learn a lot more about what AI can do and how it can be used. And perhaps I will come back to you with a different opinion. Leave that area open that I could learn something new about how AI can be used in terms of creating more nuanced, more subtle, more distinctive, and ultimately a more appealing type of results, types of output, and types of work. So what I've been doing for the last few weeks, 6 weeks, probably a month, is just setting up my system to accommodate the different AI models. I'm using the mostly the free AI models, but then the cheaper versions of the paid AI models, and occasionally also using those models that have a higher input cost per input. It could be $8 per input or $10 per input. And those are typically matched with a $15 per output. These could be US dollars. Those, that would be, in my opinion, a very expensive model. However, I've avoided using those models that are above $15 for any inputs and above $40 for any outputs. Typically, I find that for the type of tasks that I'm looking for, even a free model can do those tasks. So any one of the older models that is under $1 per input, these input prices are at 1 million tokens, by the way. And if you write, let's say, 500 words, could be something like 2,000 tokens, plus or minus 500 tokens. I really don't have a precise gauge on the token use right now. But from my experience so far, we're talking generally, I tend to have around 2,600 tokens on either end. Now, in terms of those tokens increase when we're talking about RAG operations. So I tend to feed everything in on the prompt, sometimes attaching a document as well, which obviously increases the tokens. It might double those tokens. And then when we start talking about reasoning tokens, where the AI shows us the reasoning, there's typically an intermediate price for the reasoning token as well. I tend to not want to see the reasoning because you pay for the reasoning, but I think observing the reasoning is helpful in the sense that now you can begin to understand what it is how the model is making the steps that it can make. And if you can think of each one of those steps that it's making in the way that a programmer thinks of a hook tying into a particular part of the code, then you can think of how to write a prompt that accesses that logic. An example could be where the obvious example would be where the AI says, well, I assume that I don't have any factual information in its reasoning. I don't have any factual information about the data that the user is requesting, but I assume that the user wants me to give an answer, so I'm going to make something up. So you could say to your AI in the prompt, please don't make anything up. Obviously, I only want you to return true answers or answers that are verified. You have a document that you can match with that answer. And please return the source of the document. There are models that do that. They have that in their directive. They have that in their prompts. Typically, research models, deep research types of models. Those models are trained to look at specific documents themselves. So once again, what I have been doing is going through these different models and setting up how I'm going to use those models in the context of my pipeline, my workflow. My document, my text editor, for example. So how could I get to the model and then get the model the information that I want to send to it, and then get that information back, and how I can, for example, set up the prompt. So it's really setting up the tooling for using the models. And I've been doing some use case of the models, but I found already that for some of the tasks that I do that could be considered almost somewhat time consuming, you have a shortcut, for example, and you execute that shortcut. So you fill in some information on your own. You'll fill in some tags. You'll do a little cleanup because you didn't rewrite that code. And so you are not getting your time format back in the format that is conscious of the number of texts that you're using. So you can clean a lot of this stuff up. And you'll do this manually because you haven't gone and adjusted your code. And now you can say to AI, well, you can do this now. You could also say to AI, adjust the code, or you could just go in and adjust the code. But other things are that I'm finding are I'm compiling things into different formats. So there's an area where you have to make some subjective decisions, and AI can help in putting things into a format so that you can make these decisions well. So I'm using it to write a lot of shortcuts, to write a lot of descriptions, to organize a lot of information, to tag information, and to help with transforming documents. Obviously, it could be useful in translations as well, if you're looking at translations. And I think there are so many different tasks that AI can be used for. So setting up these tasks, understanding how the models work, and including them all in your I would say in your tooling, your SDK. But no, I'm thinking in the context of your editor. Is an intelligent step that you can do, and that I've been doing as well. So there's a little bit of research that I've been doing and putting everything together to be able to use the model. So the next step for me in the AI model is looking at advanced tooling and using tooling. This is specifically important in the context of web development because typically when we are working with websites, we have a repository that has a lot of tools in that repository. You're probably going to have a build pipeline. You're probably going to be using Bazel or Vercel or just JSON packages. You're going to have some kind of builder that can integrate the different tools that you want to use in a way that's feasible within your stack. So we're talking about inside of our repository, we're going to have a lot of functionality. And so using AI as a tool handler in a repository is what's kind of the next step in terms of web development. What I presume a lot of people are doing right now all across the world as people start using AI as a tool handler. I mean, even now you can say to your AI, give me an analysis of everything in this repository. I don't think that is a tremendous step. You already know what's in the repository because you built it. But for example, perhaps you're new, you're on the team, and now you have to figure out a new repository. That would be tremendously helpful because you don't have to read the guide yourself. You can just say, return to me the parts of this guide in some way that I can explain. And it's probably even more helpful when you start talking about integrating language use. So rather than typing it all in, you can talk to the AI and then have the AI respond. That's, of course, what the Facebook chat model is all about. Facebook's just released a new app that you can communicate with verbally, and it's going to help you with figuring out how to do a recipe, for example. I mean, that's an obvious use case that's really cool now. You can use your phone. You can say, hey, I'm making, banana pancakes or something. How am I going to make these? I have no idea. And Facebook's app is going to tell you how you can make them in a voice. So I think that's cutting edge. Next step, where we're at. For me, it's the tooling kit and the build pipelines, which we might even consider in the context of a larger piece of software or an organization. You would think of that as agentic AI. So you would say having different AI models that communicate with one another to achieve particular tasks. For example, if you have a big customer complaint queue and there is a lot of text that comes in that says we have some problems, let's say with our flight bookings, then you can have an AI that analyzes the problems and sends a request off to another AI who has a different task, and then that one sends it off to another AI, ultimately comes back and says we've changed the tickets and we've rebooked you, or here are your options. So it's this idea of narrowly trained AI, which is obviously easier to train specifically AI in specific cases. In fact, even the 450 billion parameter Facebook AI model, it has specialists that are trained with different functionalities. You have the scientist, you have the computer scientist, you have the writer, the editor, you have the chat AI. There are obviously specialists within these AIs which are trained more vertically, and I'm saying vertically in the context of answers and questions of data that are field specific or area specific or specialization specific. So those 450 or however many billion parameters that model has, which is a huge amount of parameters, are really a number of different models put together that each have a specific number of parameters. That's much more reasonable. On a home computer system, you're really talking about your RAM, your GPU, your VRAM. You're going to be talking, on the top end, probably you're going to have 16 GPU. To run a big model, you probably want to have more than 40 GPU. So you're probably wanting to be able to stack your GPU so that you can have them working together in series or in parallel or however they stack to give you the processing power that you want to be able to operate with these much larger models, which is why a lot of this work that you do with the models is done in the cloud, keeping in mind that when you are asking, let's say you ask a cloud-based model to analyze your repository, it's going to upload all of your code and train the model on your code base. So you don't want probably to share your code, to share your data, to share anything that's specific to your organization, your build pipeline. So you want to have a model on your system that you can use as a tool handler to do a lot of the steps where typically you would be writing code to do those steps. And in fact, I have found that the Facebook model will come back to you. Llama 4 Maverick will come back and say, here's the code so that you can do this without asking us to do it. So I'll do the first 2 lines, and then I'm going to give you some code that you can write so that you can build this into your pipeline. So instead of saying, here you don't need to use the AI, there's no decision making, I don't have to scan this data and come up with some tags. Previously, if you wanted to scan data and come up with tags, it was a laborious process. It was really saying, if you encounter this word, or any one of these words, create a tag with this word. That's a script. It's a big long switch. It's JavaScript, and it really says when parsing this document, if you encounter, and there's a big list of words, any one of these words, I want you to give it this category. That is a very labor-intensive way of crawling data and parsing data to create things like categories and tags. And obviously AI does that type of work very well, writes descriptions and if it has an intelligent prompt, it can be very useful in these cases where there is a little bit of thinking needs to be done. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that have been building these AI and that are working with AI that are operating on a much higher level in terms of what they are currently capable of getting AI to do. I'm talking about relatively straightforward tasks and really also basic, you could think of them as basic. I wouldn't want to call them basic tasks. They are advanced tasks in the context of something like web development. I mean, it's not, but they're not advanced tasks in the concept of building rockets or something like that, or more intuitively, let's say, understanding consciousness at the level of quantum physics, for example. These are areas where there's a lot more of thinking and probably a lot more context and inference in terms of the nuance that we get from our human brain, having so many different I almost call them parameters, so many different neurons and connections between the neurons and our the information, the way that we're trained on the information that we're trained on biologically. It's quite unique, even though I still think of our brain and our physiological system in the same way as people think of computers. And that's obviously another interesting topic about whether or not, we are computers. Are we computers, or are we biological creatures? That's very interesting. Okay, so that's it for this update. I think I have to go right now, but we'll come back to you with another update in the future. Okay, thanks so much. Looking forward to seeing you guys next time.